This is the week 7 lecture on articulatory descriptions, and in this one we're going to do a semi-worked example, and we're also going to look at the worked example provided by Patricia Ashby, which is accessible via the International Phonetic Association web pages. Okay, so as you may remember from the last lecture, for an articulatory description you need diagrams, you need a narrative, and we also started by looking at the tick list, so the things that you actually have to put in it. So let's go back to the tick list again. You should include a phonemic transcription of the word, an allophonic transcription of the word, a parametric diagram showing velic function and voicing, a prose description of the articulation of the word led by the above, mentioning airstream, so that's led by the parametric diagram, a vowel chart showing the position of at least one vowel in the word. If there's more than one syllable, there may be more than one vowel, in which case you need to plot more than one vowel, and a sagittal section diagram showing an interesting moment in the articulation of the word. You need to describe the following things: the jaw, the lips, the tongue, don't forget what the sides of the tongue are doing, the velum, the vocal folds or glottis, and you should start and finish with the rest position. Okay, let's go to the diagrams. So in this example, the word that we're using is brindle. Brindle means brown or tawny with streaks of other colour, and you'll find that all sorts of fun words pop up in these kinds of descriptions. What I've given you below is a broad phonetic transcription of the word brindle, and then a narrow phonetic transcription of the word. So the broad phonetic transcription of the word is this one, and the narrow phonetic transcription of the word is this one here. The first thing we need to do is produce a parametric diagram. Here we have our word brindle broken up into segments, as we've discussed before, with diacritics aligned with segments depending on the effect that they're having, and we need to indicate whether the velum is raised or lowered and whether there is voicing or no voicing. You can put all sorts of things on parametric diagrams, but these two are the ones that you commonly find in the articulatory description diagram. So to start with, we need to note that the velum is going to be raised from the rest position because we have an obstruent consonant. So here's the velum rising there, and then it is in the raised position for the articulation of the consonant. Now let's look at this consonant in a little bit more detail. What we have here is a voiced bilabial plosive. As we know in English, however, voiced bilabial plosives, if they are at the beginnings of words and preceded by silence, are not very voiced. So I'm indicating here that it is devoiced. Why this diacritic will not sit underneath the B, I don't know, but it refuses to, so it's here. I do apologise, it should be directly under. I have played about with this for a good 10 minutes or so and still can't get it in the right place. Next, you can see that there is a little R, upside down R symbol next to it here. Why is that there? Well, that's indicating that there is co-articulation occurring in the environment of the following post-alveolar approximant. So when my lips are closed for the first consonant here, at the same time my tongue is raised towards the alveolar ridge, just behind the alveolar ridge, and that's what this is indicating. Now we'll look at different sorts of articulations in this position shortly, but for the time being we just need to indicate that that's going on as well. Next to the R sound itself, we have got some labialization indicated here. R sounds in the target accent often have labial movement as well, and so if I say brindle, brindle, you can see my lips protrude when I say the R, so that's what's going on there. Also, I've got some nasalization indicated over this consonant and over the following vowel. Why is that? It's because it's in the environment of a following nasal consonant, and because the velum has to be lowered for this, I'm going to get some nasal airflow during the production of these two sounds. So we can show that now happening on the diagram here. So the velum is lowering in anticipation of the lowered velum needed for the nasal consonant. Following the nasal, I have a voiced alveolar plosive here, and I've indicated a little N symbol here, and this is telling us that we have a nasal approach. These two sounds are homorganic, they are both alveolar, and in order to get from the nasal to the plosive consonant, the only thing that's going to happen is that my velum is going to rise sharply in this case. So here we have a gradual lowering of the velum, but in this case we're going to have a sharp rise because the consonant following is a plosive and requires velate closure. The next thing I've got after this is a lateral consonant, and again these two are homorganic, so this is a homorganic lateral approximant, and in order to get from this sound to this sound we need to lower the sides of the tongue. So this symbol here, it should be a small L, but I've indicated it with a capital one so that it doesn't look like a stress mark. This symbol here is indicating that the sides of the tongue are lowering in order to produce this consonant. This is a syllabic L, and as we know in this target accent, syllabic L sounds are velarized, so the symbol next to it is indicating velarization. I have not indicated under here that this consonant is devoiced, and that's because it's surrounded by voiced sounds. There's a possibility it might be devoiced, but we can assume here that it isn't. So I have my raised velum here, and at the end of the production of this word I need to lower the velum back for normal breathing. So let's have that moving down now. In fact, this could be happening over the articulation of this consonant because it doesn't matter for an approximant whether the velum is raised or lowered, but just for the diagram I'm going to indicate it's lowering here. The next thing we need to do is show voicing. Looking at this, I've indicated that this is a devoiced voiced plosive. So I don't want to have the voicing starting immediately, and in fact what we've decided to do is indicate that the voicing starts just before the release, but it could also start at the release of the consonant or very, very slightly after it, but we don't want to have a big gap there because that would indicate that it was aspirated, that the voice onset time was delayed enough to indicate an aspirated plosive, and we don't have one of those here. So we're going to show a period of voicelessness, and then for the rest of the word the whole thing is voiced, so we can indicate that, and then at the end of the production the vocal folds open again for normal breathing. So that's what's going on with this transcription and also with the parametric diagram. Now I've forgotten to add in a stress mark here, but we would also show that this syllable is stressed, and you can see that on the preceding slide. Now we want to give an interesting point in articulation if we are showing a sagittal section. So we want to choose a point in the word where something interesting is happening, not just any old articulation, a primary articulation, but something where there's a secondary articulation, or it could be a lateral release or a nasal approach or something like that. But we want to indicate something interesting in order to show the sorts of activity that go on during speech. Okay, so the word is brindle, and I've got lots of opportunities for showing interesting things going on with the articulation. For example, I can show the anticipatory movement of the tongue towards the, just behind the alveolar ridge there, while my lips are closed. I could also show labialization during the production of the R sound itself. I could show what's going on when I'm producing a nasal approach, so you'd have to indicate that with dotted lines to show the movement of the velum there. Also the lateral release, I would indicate that with dotted lines showing the lowering of the sides of the tongue, and I can also show that I have a velarized L, so lots of possibilities. Now I've gone for the first one here, which is the bilabial closure with the simultaneous secondary articulation of the tongue in readiness for the production of the post-alveolar approximant consonant. So here's my blank diagram, and I'm going to modify that by filling some of these bits in here, and I have filled in the following bits. This is what it looks like when I've added those bits to it. This here is the tongue tip, and this is the front part of the tongue, the blade and front part of the tongue raised towards the post-alveolar area. That's what's going on there. Now let's have a look at the articulatory description that's produced by Patricia Ashby, because she shows this kind of thing in a different way. Here we go. So I'm going to scroll down this until we get to the actual description itself. And in her diagram, what she's showing is the production of a voiceless bilabial plosive with anticipatory lingual co-articulation of the R sound. But if you look here, you can see that it's actually quite different from the shape that I've given. So she said tongue tip in open approximation to rear of alveolar ridge. That's what she's shown there. I haven't shown that. I've shown this kind of shape. This is because it's generally recognised that there are mainly two different sorts of articulations that you can get in production of an R sound. When I produce my R, I've got a bunched R, and that means that my tongue, the front part of my tongue and the blade area bunch up and move towards the alveolar ridge, just behind the alveolar ridge there. And that's what I'm indicating in this diagram. In the diagram on the demo from Patricia, she's shown what we call an apical R, and is sometimes also referred to as a retroflexed R, which is where the tongue tip moves up, and in some cases we've got this backward action as well, where the tongue tip curls over. So that's what she has shown there. Okay, so this is my diagram. I probably could have added a few other arrows in this direction here, but I've got my diagram showing my airflow coming up through the glottis. So what am I showing here? I have to label this first. This is a sagittal section diagram showing the hold phase of this sound with anticipatory lingual co-articulation of this sound here. And again, I'm really sorry that's not going underneath the B. I don't know why it will do that sometimes and not others. Okay, so what am I showing in my diagram? I'm showing medium jaw and closed lips. So medium jaw means that the jaw is raised from the rest position, and the rest position is lightly clenched, so now the jaw is raised slightly from that. We'll come to the rest position shortly. I'm also showing the front of the tongue bunched in wide approximation to the rear of the alveolar ridge. I'm showing aggressive pulmonic airstream here. I'm showing the glottis open, the vocal folds are open there, and that's because when I'm articulating the first part of this consonant before the voicing starts, I haven't got any voicing because it is devoiced. And I'm also showing V-lick closure. So those are the things that I'm showing on this diagram here. And if we look at the diagram produced by Patricia, we can see that we've got something quite similar. She's also got the raised back of the tongue because there was something else going on in the production of this word. Okay, your vowel chart. The vowel chart needs to be just like the ones we've drawn before, so it's this kind of shape here, and we need to make sure that we have labelled it properly. So we need to indicate the front, central and back areas, and this is the areas to which the front of the tongue, the centre area of the tongue or the back of the tongue are arching basically, or compressing. We also need to indicate close, close, mid, and open, so the height of the tongue and the jaw, the amount of closure of the jaw. And we also need to put around it the primary cardinal vowels. So these are they, and you can see in this case I've indicated cardinal vowel 5, which is here, at the at the back, so it's just on this side, because we're just showing the primary one, so we don't need to worry about it being on the other side of this area here. Those are my primary cardinal vowels. This is my labelled vowel chart. Now I also need to give my vowel chart a heading. So this is a vowel chart showing resonance of this vowel. It's actually the vowel that we're using here. I could put nasalization over the top of it because it's a nasalized vowel. In fact, why don't we just add nasalization to it there? Oh, hello. Why don't we add nasalization to the vowel? Oh, no, that's not the right thing. And we can also add it to that one as well. Right. So I've now got my nasalization on it. Hooray! There we go. There's our vowel. So you can do it by actually placing the vowel on that position, or alternatively, what Patricia has done in her description is have a spot and indicate that that's where it is. So this vowel is on this spot and this vowel here is on that spot. Now it's up to you to decide what the tidiest way of doing this is. It's possible that this would clash with the side of the diagram, for example, therefore it's better to show it like that. Okay, so this is our vowel chart showing the resonance of the nasalized kit vowel. So you've got your tick list, you've drawn your diagrams, and we're now going to look at the actual narrative. Narratives need a beginning, a middle and an end. No surprise there, and that's what we also need in our articulatory description. When you start your narrative, we always start the narrative of the articulatory description with the rest position. And there is a particular form of words that we use for the rest position, and they are used here on this example from Patricia. So it says, this paragraph describing the rest position begins all articulatory descriptions and must come immediately after the parametric diagram. Memorize it for use in the exam. So if you're taking the IPA exam, you need to be able to produce this paragraph or something very, very similar to it. And the paragraph is here. Before the utterance begins, the articulators are in the rest position. The jaw is lightly clenched, the lips closed, the tongue fills most of the oral cavity, the velum is down, and the glottis open for normal breathing. The utterance will be produced on a pulmonic egressive airstream. So that's it. That's how you start. That is our rest position. You then have to prepare your articulators to start producing speech. And the normal way of doing this is, in anticipation of X, whatever your articulation is, whatever it is happens. Use your narrow transcription and parametric diagram to help you work out what it is you want to say. So here we go, here it is. If we look at our narrow transcription, we can see that we need to say what's going to happen in order for our articulators to be in the position of a devoiced bilabial plosive. So we need to indicate what's going to happen there, and largely it's going to be the lips close, the two lips close. We also need to indicate that there is some co-articulation going on there. So we need to show that there is the tongue moving towards the rear part of the alveolar ridge, whether this is a tongue tip articulation or a bunched R articulation. So we need to indicate that. We also need to indicate that the velum is going to rise, and in fact that's happening here even before we're doing anything else. So we would want to say the velum begins to rise in anticipation of the articulation of the devoiced bilabial plosive. We also need to say what's going on with the voicing. Is it the case that the vocal folds are going to come together in order for voicing to start? Well, here we're starting with a devoiced consonant, so no, that's not going to happen quite then, but we do need to make sure that the lungs are filled with air so that we can produce this word. So we can get lots of information from our diagram, and this is why the diagram is vital, absolutely vital, that you do a good diagram and that you have an accurate narrow transcription, because that is going to lead your transcription, your articulatory description. So you said what happens in anticipation of this, and if we look at the description that Patricia has produced, her word is impressed. So what she says is, and if we look here we can see that we have a nasalized vowel in the environment of a nasal consonant. We've also got the voicing starting right away, and we've got the velum is lowered in this case. So what she says is, in anticipation of the forthcoming M sound, the velum remains in the open position. Simultaneously, the jaw opens to a narrow aperture, the lips part and assume a fairly neutral position, and part of the tongue nearer to the centre than the front rises to a height just above half close, below the hard palate. So she's talking about the production of the vowel sound. You need to describe as appropriate the jaw, the lips, the tongue, don't forget the sides of the tongue, the velum and the vocal folds. So what are each of these things doing? So the jaw, the lips, the tongue, the velum and the vocal folds. If we look at the description that Patricia has produced, we've got the velum, we've got the jaw, we've got the lips, and we've got the tongue moving to this position just above half close, etc. So we've got information about that. Also, the side rims of the tongue are rising and making light contact with the edges of the upper molars. We don't need firm contact at the moment because, well, in fact we don't need firm contact here at all just now, because we're actually doing a bilabial consonant. You also need to talk about the auditory effect of the resulting sound. What does it sound like? Useful phrases are audible plosion, audible friction, audible approximant resonance, audible vowel resonance, audible nasal resonance, audible nasalized vowel or nasalized approximant yeah, that's right, or audible nasalized vowel or nasalized approximant resonance as appropriate. And also silence. You don't have to say audible silence, of course, because silence is not something that, I guess it is kind of something that you hear anyway, but you can also have silence. Other things which are useful include after an appreciable or a short interval of whatever sound, so friction, for example. Almost immediately something happens, so if we have a nasal approach, for example, almost immediately the velum closes in anticipation of the following plosive or obstruent consonant. In anticipation of, that's the next phrase. Also X is heard, so what it is you can hear, and Y terminates, so for example voicing terminates at the end of a word. So if we look at the example here from Brindle, after a silent period of compression, the vocal folds come together and begin to vibrate. Audible plosion is heard as the articulators separate, followed by a brief period of post-alveolar approximant resonance as the jaw begins an opening movement to a medium aperture. Okay, so that would be describing what we can hear, describing the movements and so on. So we need to be able to do that. Then you need to continue your narrative along similar lines, basically, so making sure that you are indicating, if there is co-articulation, that things are happening simultaneously, or things are happening very quickly, or that things are going on for a period of time. Continue to use your diagrams to assist your narrative. So again, very important that your diagrams are done well. Note the position the articulators move to and away from. Note the effect on the airstream. Note the audible effect. Finally, you're going to end your narrative. Make sure you return your articulators to the rest position, particularly important if the utterance ends with an unreleased plosive. I can't do anything until you release me. I can't breathe. So it's a good idea to make sure that you've done that. Also, if you've got a fricative at the end, for example, you want to make sure that the person stops producing it, otherwise they're just going to be saying something like this for the rest of their lives. So make sure that you return the articulators to the rest position. Okay, see how you get on with the test word that I've given you, which is crunchy.